All right, thanks, Parker. That was great. This is our last talk before the break, during which there will be snacks. But for now, Rachel Fabi is a bioethics professor and crossword constructor. Rachel's crosswords have appeared in the New York Times, the USA Today, the New Yorker, and many other mainstream and indie puzzle outlets. Rachel is the founder and co-editor of These Puzzles Fund Abortion and also serves as the crossword editor at Autostraddle.
Hi, good morning, everyone. I do want to express my gratitude to Puzzmo and to Brooke for making this happen. So as Brooke mentioned, my name is Rachel Fabi. I'm a bioethics professor, which is not material to what I'm talking about today, but I am also a crossword constructor and editor and the co-founder and co-editor, along with Brooke and our brilliant friend Claire, of These Puzzles Fund Abortion. So I'll be talking today about sort of the trajectory in crossword puzzles of creating and disseminating charity packs, which is a phenomenon that's occurred over the last decade or so in crosswords. So I'll talk a little bit about that history, about who's done it before, and what I've done with These Puzzles Fund Abortion. And then I want to sort of dig into why crossword puzzles are such a well-suited medium for this kind of work and why we do this kind of work. I'll give 2 examples of charity packs that have happened in the last half decade, and then some takeaways for people who want to get involved in fundraising charity work, but maybe aren't crossword constructors. So it's, you can sort of generalize from lessons that we have learned. So you can see up here a few examples of charity packs that have come out over the last decade. Sort of the first one that comes to mind for me is Puzzles for Progress. This is a charity pack that was created by the constructor Francis Haney in the wake of the 2016 election. Francis was pretty disturbed by the outcome of that election and wanted to do something, wanted to have some sort of response that used the skills that Francis had to raise awareness, raise money, something in response. And so what Francis developed is the model that the rest of these charity packs have used, which is to basically ask your friends who are really talented to contribute crossword puzzles and then exchange those crossword puzzles for donations to a cause that you care about. And so the other packs that are up here have done that for a variety of causes. I'm going to focus today on just one of these and then my own. So I'm going to talk first about queer crosswords. But before I get into that, I told you I would talk a little bit about why crossword puzzles are such a good medium for this kind of work. So you can see here a grid that I created with my friend Rebecca Goldstein for one of the These Puzzles Fund Abortion packs. If you are a person who solves, you might recognize that this is a grid art puzzle. That is a uterus. The title of the puzzle is Mass Hysteria. And I think that this puzzle is a very good visual representation of what I would argue is puzzle's expressive nature. So unlike, say, Sudoku or Good Sudoku, which doesn't really tell a story, it doesn't have a message, crossword puzzles are by nature expressive. You can hear the constructor's voice if the constructor wants you to, and they can have a theme that tells a story or makes an argument. And so puzzles are actually a really good medium for telling that message to the world. Another thing that I really like about crossword people, the crossword community, and I don't have a citation for this, and as a professor, if I saw this in a paper, I'd be like, but I'm just going to claim it without a citation. People in crosswords are progressive. And I think my argument for why this is the case, at least in my experience, is that people who solve crosswords are naturally interested, naturally curious about the world around them. Right? If you're asking questions, if you are a curious person, you probably espouse some progressive values. And again, this isn't universal. I have certainly gotten hate mail from people in puzzles who think that my puzzles are too progressive or have too much of a message. But I think in general, this is a shared value of people who solve crosswords. Another thing about crosswords that makes them particularly good for this kind of work is that they are digital. I mean, you can also sell them in a newspaper or in a zine. But you can send them by email for free. So unlike a bake sale or selling t-shirts, you can raise money using crossword puzzles and not pay shipping and handling, which is really convenient because then all of the money that you raise goes directly to the cause that you support. But then finally, I think for the people who have made these packs in the past, the most important thing here is that this is what we're good at, right? When you see a problem in the world that you want to fix, and you're starting to like grasp at straws, like how do I fix this? What can I do? Well, this is what some of us can do, right? We are good at crossword puzzles, and so we make crossword puzzles, and that's our solution to the problem we're trying to solve. And so why charity? Why are we trying to solve these problems with crosswords? For me personally, as Brooke mentioned, I'm a bioethics professor. I'm a scholar, and a lot of my work is in the area of reproductive justice. But when you're an academic, like you write your little papers, and they go off into little journals, and like maybe other academics read them, but they don't really have a huge impact, or you don't feel that impact. So praxis is the process of taking your theories, lessons, skills, and enacting them, putting them into practice. So for me, making these puzzles fund abortion is an act of praxis, right? It's taking this thing that I really care about, which is reproductive justice, and actualizing it in a meaningful way that actually affects people's lives. But that's not the only reason that this works. So I said I would talk about queer crosswords. I'm going to talk a little bit about their reason for existing. So you can see here a screenshot of a New York Times crossword where the entry bride was clued as groom's partner. Now, you may not know this, but grooms can have partners that aren't brides. And if you are such a person and you are seeing this entry in a puzzle, you might say, wow, this really doesn't represent me or my experience. And for Nate Carden, who created Queer Crosswords, that was the experience that Nate repeatedly had, solving mainstream entries that had this heteronormative bent to them. And Nate said, that's not me, that's not what I want to be solving. And so Nate created Queer Crosswords as a way to sort of be the change he wanted to see in the world, right? He wanted his puzzle, the puzzles that he solved to reflect his life, to reflect the lives of his friends. And so in creating Queer Crosswords, which again followed that same model of having people donate puzzles that were vaguely queer themed, it shifted the Overton window a little bit on what you can see in a crossword puzzle, what sorts of clues can exist in a crossword space. And since Queer Crosswords, we've seen that shift happening even in mainstream outlets. Last year, or maybe it was 2 years ago now, the Times published gay porn in a puzzle, which was just like, so good. And I think that would not have been possible without Queer Crosswords, right? I think it shifted just what is acceptable. And I asked Nate, why a charity pack, right? So for me, it was praxis. For Nate, it was capitalism. He didn't want to sell the puzzles, right? He wanted the puzzles to contribute to making lives better for queer people. And so with Queer Crosswords, if you donate to a queer charity, they'll send you the pack, right? And so that was his why. All right, so I'm going to talk a little bit about These Puzzles Fund Abortion, which is the pack that I founded and now co-edit with Brooke and Claire. So in 2021, a friend of mine who was at the time the president of the Baltimore Abortion Fund asked me to make a puzzle for their annual Fundathon fundraiser. Now, taking a step back, if you don't know what an abortion fund is, that's if you're a person who needs an abortion but can't afford it, they will pay for the abortion or they will pay for you to travel out of state to get an abortion. They'll help you basically get the resources you need to access the healthcare that you need. And I told my friend, well, I've seen Puzzles for Progress, I've seen Queer Crosswords, I think I can do that. And so I asked a bunch of my very talented friends to make puzzles, and they very generously did. And we raised about $35,000 in that first year using the same model, right? We give you puzzles, you make a donation, sort of a nice transaction. And then we sort of couldn't stop, right? If you've raised $35,000 and you see that there's an appetite for this, you kind of have to keep going, right? It would be, considering that abortion is still restricted and there are still needs, we couldn't stop. So after 2021, we had a little interlude where we did some bonus puzzles when Texas SB 8 came out. That was a really restrictive abortion policy in Texas. We raised another $30,000. The following year, we had These Puzzles Fund Abortion 2 and raised $70,000 because the Dobbs decision leaked halfway through our fundraiser. And so our donations basically doubled overnight, speaking to that, progressive values and crosswords coexisting really nicely argument. So then last year, These Puzzles Fund Abortion 3 raised $70,000, and we're currently in the process of These Puzzles Fund Abortion for. There's a sample puzzle outside, and I'll also have a QR code, so you can check those out later. And to date, we've raised over $45,000 this year. So it's continuing to, thank you. And I have some stats. So for the full, 4-year process, we've raised almost $250,000. We've supported not just the Baltimore Abortion Fund, but actually 10 abortion funds across the country, and actually around the world. This year, we're supporting a fund in Mexico. But I think the stat that matters the most to me is that 78 puzzles have been donated. So, incredible constructors who care about this, who saw a problem and said, what can I do? How do I help? Donated puzzles to our cause, donated their time, people who donated their test solving skills. Maybe they're not constructors, but they wanted to help, so they tested the puzzles. These Puzzles Fund Abortion for had over 50 people working on it. So, this sort of growth, to speak to Malika's Crosswords and community, just was unfathomable to me initially, and it continues. So the takeaways for me, if you want to sort of replicate this kind of process in a different space, the first thing to ask yourself is, what am I good at? Right? Not everyone is necessarily good at constructing crosswords, although in this room, I don't know that that's necessarily true. But maybe you're good at baking, maybe you are a musician, maybe you're a website designer. These are things that you can offer in order to raise money for a cause you care about. And then the second thing I would say is you need to find partners. So we were really lucky to partner with the Baltimore Abortion Fund and with the National Network of Abortion Funds, because we didn't want to reinvent the wheel, right? We didn't want to go out and say, we're going to provide abortions. We don't know how to do that. Or say, we're going to move people across state lines, because that's dangerous, right? We found people who were already doing the work and said, how can we support your work? Oh, you need money? We'll get you money, right? So partnering with people is really important. And then just thinking about your why, right? Because this work is actually very hard. These Puzzles Fund Abortion is a 6-month process. We work on it from November to May, and then we recover, and then we start over. And so sort of keeping in mind like the reason you're doing it, for me it's the praxis, for Nate it was being the change you want to see in the world. That's what keeps us going. So if you're interested in learning more about these Puzzles Fund Abortion or the other charity packs that I listed earlier, I have 2 QR codes for you here. And again, one of the TPFA 4 puzzles is available on the puzzle table if you want to check it out before donating. And that's it.
Questions for Rachel? Adrian, and then Zach, you can get Kate.
Thank you so much. Rachel, I'm so inspired by you. I just wanted to ask a quick question, because one of the reasons that I started Puzzles for Palestine was to share some stories and like some people, because it was a little bit different because I'm not as I'm not Palestinian, like I don't live in the region. It doesn't affect me as pressingly as like Queer Crosswords does, or like these Puzzles Fund Abortion. So what are some of the underlying themes, or like, I don't know what that word is, but like the kind of stories that you've seen over the years, and how have they grown from year 1 now into year 4, from the different crossword constructors, both male, female, non-binary, young and old, and how they've approached this issue in your eyes as the editor?
Yeah, I love that question. So, I mean, I think you're right that there are people who have contributed puzzles who like have needed abortions and maybe had help accessing them, and so they're contributing because it's personally meaningful to them. There are people who know that they might someday need an abortion. Brooke wrote a really brilliant puzzle a couple years ago, speaking to like abortion bans after a certain number of weeks, that sort of translates that experience into a puzzle, which I should have brought that one. It's so smart. So I think we try to get that into the themes, right? This year we have a puzzle from Natan, who is here somewhere, that sort of speaks to the experience of trying to cross state lines for an abortion, because as we're seeing with abortion bans around the country, that has become very necessary for a lot of people. So yeah, we take these sort of stories from our own experience from the news and incorporate them into the themes of the puzzles, which I think is really beautiful. Thank you for that question.
Hi, Rachel. Can you hear me okay through the mask?
You're good.
I think that it's great how many different projects have arisen that follow this model. But I wonder, is there any ever a part of you that feels that the field is becoming crowded and that there's like a reduced impact just because of people's attention being diverted to so many different charity packs, or how do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it is possible that people are, overwhelmed by the number of charity packs, but I haven't experienced that with TPFA. We did see a dip. I don't know if you saw in the, let's see if I can go back. Right there. In 2023, we only made $70,000 because we had a matching donor. So we actually went from making 35 to 70 back to 35, and then it doubled with a matcher. And I think part of that is also people's political exhaustion, right? So in 2022, the Dobbs decision, people were very activated. And then you get exhausted. You can't stay activated all the time. Fortunately, puzzles are a form of self-care, so you can refresh yourself with puzzles. But yeah, I think that our cause remains relevant, and people see that. I am grateful to this community for continuing to support it.
Can I add something to that?
Yeah.
I think that also we get Crossword community people, but also people who are coming by way of the cause. I think that there are a lot of people who care about supporting abortion funds, and maybe these are the only crossword puzzles they solve, or maybe they don't even solve them. Any other questions for Rachel?
Not a question so much as just to applaud the impact, which apparently has been so impactful as to cause a Midtown Manhattan earthquake.
There was the magnitude 4.8 centered in New Jersey, for everyone wondering.
Thanks, Kara. Any other questions? I'll get you next.
Hey there, Rachel.
Hi.
I just had a quick question about what goes into the specific decisions about which organizations to donate to as you get up this amount of money. I mean, there's obviously a ton of need, and I'm sure that, there's much more need than this amount of dollars can ever cover. So how do you decide which organizations?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the Baltimore Abortion Fund is kind of my OG. I did my PhD in Baltimore, and I have friends there, so we keep them every year. And then we work with the National Network of Abortion Funds to sort of figure out where the need is, what funds are going to need the most support. So this year, we're supporting the Baltimore Abortion Fund, but then also the Chicago Abortion Fund, because a lot of people from neighboring states are traveling to Illinois. We're supporting the Tampa Bay Abortion Fund because they're sending a lot of people out of state. And then we support Indigenous Women Rising, which is a national fund for people who are indigenous who need abortion care. And then finally, Fondo Maria is the Mexican fund that we're supporting because a lot of people are traveling from southwestern states into Mexico. So that was sort of decided in partnership with NNAF to sort of add to Baltimore.
We'll do one more question from Jesse. Zach, can you?
Just a technical question. Have you found any better way of distributing these than just someone emailing them each time? I've been involved with a couple of these and spent more time than I wanted to just replying, thanks for your contribution, here's a pack of puzzles.
I have not, and that person is me. So if you get these emails, that's me every morning at 6:30 looking at the previous day's donors and like copying your email into a BCC. We haven't figured out a better way to do it because we thought about just putting a link, but then people can share the link, and I think it's easier to send a link to someone and be like, here's some free puzzles, than it is to send a zip file. I don't know if that's actually true. It feels true. So we do not have a better solution. Sorry, Jesse.
Thank you so much, Rachel.
Thanks, Brooke.
Thank you. So we now have a 30-minute break. These slides are rotating we're hanging out at the Empire Hotel afterwards. Come back at 11:10 to see Ben and Liz's talks, and then we have a speed solver panel, and it will be great. And for now, enjoy snacks and caffeine, but don't bring the liquids or food back into the auditorium. Thank you so much.